And so now, without any further ado, it's a great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker. He knows a lot about the situation of tenants. He's an organizer. He's the executive director of the Federation of Metro Tenants Associations. Please join me in welcoming Geordie Dent.
Hey folks, thanks for having me tonight. I'm going to be talking about a few things. I really like the Condo Game, at least some elements of it. This is something that I've been following in the FMTA for probably about 6 to 8 years. You saw that guy in Vancouver being like, rot, rot, rot. That guy grew up that guy had his condo about a block and a half from my high school. I was happy to have grown up in the most rotten area, suburb of Vancouver, where almost every person that bought a condominium, all the parents of my friends had bought something, moved into something, and then were basically chained to those things in huge condo fees for years. So I grew up right in the thick of that, and of course was happy in 2008 when I finally got out of the out of control Vancouver rental market to come to some semblance of sanity here in Toronto. Little did I know. But I do want to talk about a couple of things. So mostly what they're talking about today is not really the rental market, although there are beliefs that it's going to get to that. Mostly what they're talking today is the real estate market in Toronto. I got a lot of things to say about that, but you should note that I work for the Federation of Metro Tenants Associations. All right, so we're an organization that's about 40 years old, and we started off just as that. There was a series of tenants associations around Toronto in high-rise towers. They said, man, there's a lot of us in the city. We should get together in some kind of federation to ensure that we're not being taken advantage of, to ensure that we're fighting for better rights for ourselves. And the federation was born and has been doing a lot of that work for years. It's difficult work, it's hard work, but every day I get to talk to people on the phone and reap the benefits of that work. Fathers crying on the phone because they realize they don't actually have to move out tomorrow. People saving thousands of dollars because they realize they don't have to pay what their landlord's telling them to pay. People living in pretty precarious, hard to house kind of situations. They get to stay in their housing because they realize there's an eviction process, et cetera, et cetera. So Federation, a couple of moments before I really get into it. We run a host of services. We got a tenant hotline. So anyone here rent? Anyone? It's a big rental city. If you have any questions around your rights as a tenant, you can always call our hotline. We'll tell you what the law says, tell you what you can do, tell you when you can go tell your landlord to fly a kite, or when you're going to have to buck up and do the thing because you're supposed to do it because it's the way it is under the law. We've got a whole host of services as well, including a tenant association development worker. So their whole goal is to go into high-rise towers and help people organize. So we're talking about organizing. This is a good segue to say this. Rent control, tenant issues are key to socialism. Okay? They are key to socialism. If you don't believe me, take a look at the first law that was passed after the Cuban Revolution. Okay, the first law was a law on rent control. Now, it's mostly farms, but also, as you know, there's a huge urban areas in Cuba, and it was that much of an important issue that of all the things that they ended up doing in the Cuban Revolution, the first one that they dealt with was rent. All right. If you look at a more kind of social democratic scenario, but with a high degree of government ownership, you'll find Sweden. And I used to live in Norway, so if you hear me talk, I always go on about Norway and Sweden and Finland and Scandinavian bloc countries. But you'll notice that Sweden actually has a majority of renters nationally. About 63% of the people are renters. And they've done a lot of major projects around the rental housing market in terms of government ownership, in terms of government building, in terms of massive projects. When rental governance is done properly, it ensures a lot of important things for humanity, for people's lives, for the development of a good place to live and safety, security, health, et cetera, et cetera. It ensures you have a stable place to live, to do your work from, or to do your activism, or to do whatever it is you do. It fixed costs. So you'll noticing a lot of the people that bought the condos don't have fixed costs. They get into a scenario where they might be living at the end of their means or just comfortably, and then they get hit with something like $200,000 in repair costs. You don't have that when you rent. A lot of seniors in the city of Toronto love to rent because they get a certain amount of money every month, they move into their unit, and they pay that certain amount of money every month. Maintenance is also done by somebody else. You're a big landlord that owns those high-rise towers all over the city, if they're actually doing their job, which I know can be suspect sometimes. They're the ones doing the maintenance, they're the ones paying for that. It's not really something you have to worry about. All right, and when we talk about things like a command economy, active housing market participation by government is key. So I brought up Sweden. Sweden in the 1960s and 70s had the Miljonhus program, and the Miljonhus program said we are going to build 1 million social housing units in 10 years. And they did it in a country of 8 million people.
Wow.
Yeah. Now, before I glorify Scandinavia, my girlfriend will come in and rap me over the knuckles and force me to remind you that there's serious problems in ghettoization in those units. A lot of them look like, large gray buildings and don't have very good social networks. It was the 60s and 70s, a lot of the new development stuff, but a very bold project that could be replicated here. However, when I meet with the Premier's office and say, have you ever thought about something like that, you can imagine what they're saying. The flip side to this is that rent control and the rental market are also a key component of capitalism. All right, if done properly for capitalists, it entrenches a state of precarity. All right, you are in a place where you can be thrown out of and your life destroyed at any moment. All right, a lot of the worst kinds of forms of rental housing you see are kind of in like mining towns or worker towns. If you go up to Fort Mac, and if you look on the tar sands, you'll see these horrible rental situations where, oh, you've lost your job, you've got a week to get out. Your entire life's built up around this stuff. All right. If you look at landlord profits, as I tend and want to do, you'll also note that it's probably one of the most ingenious scams that you ever thought. You build a big building, you put in the cost, you fill it full of 200 people that pay you $1,000, $1,500 a month. That's $12,000 to $18,000 a year times 200. And then your buildings pay off. And what do you think happens when the buildings pay off? Oh, how the money rolls in. And it rolls in, and it rolls in, and it rolls in. They don't have to do any extra upgrades. They don't need to give you the pool or the sauna. They don't need to give you more parking. In fact, they can take those things away. It also involves the ownership of land, a key element in terms of the means of production, and a key element of colonization when we talk about indigenous rights. You're seeing what happened at those rail yards. You've seen what happened in Vancouver at the Pacific Railway yards for Expo. A developer came in and said, yeah, I'm going to buy this now. And I'm going to put 50 towers on it. And I'm going to rake in the dough. That really shouldn't happen. You got to wonder what connections those people had to be able to get that land that really didn't belong to them. This is all kind of high-level stuff, but there are really two key examples that illustrate this. Our hotline takes 10,000 calls a year, wow. So you can imagine I get old hat at this stuff, and it's information that I kind of goes in one ear and out the other when it comes to the horrible things I hear. I'm not going to, heard that last week, and the week before that, and the week before that. But as Barry had mentioned, you had a fire last night in Kensington Market, and that fire killed 2 people, put another 11 in hospital, or 9 in hospital. I've been doing media work on that all day today. And one of the terrible scenarios about that fire is that it was not just caused by an individual scenario. The system is set up for that, and it is set up to continue that happening. Again, if you've done my job for as long as I have, fires in Toronto are not new, and they're only getting worse for a variety of reasons. The rental stock is getting older and older. Everything that's being built now is not a series of low rises or high-rise buildings with mixed income. It's all glass condos, which means the cheap rental units in a city spiraling out of control in terms of costs that you're finding are often in precarious situations like that. 11 people stuffed into a house. No proactive enforcement by the Fire Standards Office or the Municipal Licensing and Standards Department in the City of Toronto. There will be no criminal negligence regardless of how bad the landlord botched this stuff. This is all a consequence of what you're seeing on here in terms of the rental and housing markets. It's a consequence of poor enforcement, whereby if I go steal a loaf of bread, I could get a year in jail. But if I'm a landlord that totally steals money from little old ladies, subjects your kids to bed bug bites, there will be no consequence. All right, you might get an order from the city of Toronto. You might have to fight for 5 years at the landlord and tenant board like the tenants of 200 Roehampton did. You might eventually win, but literally in that case that I just told you, tenants died before they were able to win against the landlord. So that's the uphill battle on that. I could draw from dozens of examples, but 277-9 Yonge Street. It's a building in North York. It has been without heat for a month now. Yeah, it's been in the Toronto Star. Unbelievable given the amount of enforcement that's been dealt with. The city's been there. The city's issued 24 work orders against the landlord in the last 2 years. The tenants have gone to the landlord and tenant board. Now, if I was the adjudicator at the board, I might say something like, if that heat is not on by tomorrow, the fines will start at $25,000 and will continue to build for every day until they're paid off. And the tenants don't have to pay rent. Of course, that would be a just society for no heat. Of course, that didn't happen. Again, the landlord has not been fined at all. Well, I think they've been fined by the city $2,000 or something like that. It's Mickey Mouse. Moving from kind of the specific and individual and more into the stuff that we were watching in the Condo Game. Another example of kind of the state of capitalism in the rental sector is the growth that we've actually seen in the rental sector. 2008, I don't have to go on about what happened there, but you had a global crash, you had a huge financial meltdown, and the financial meltdown actually happened because of many of the reasons that we're actually seeing happening in Toronto. Okay, you had a massive speculative bubble that was based on cheap real estate being thrown up. That bubble created the backbone of dodgy financial investment, and the whole house of cards came down. One of the things that didn't go down in the United States, even with massive property value losses, is the rental sector. The rental sector is a baseline for economic growth. And in a city like Toronto, does anyone know how the percentage of tenants in Toronto? 50%. Half. And that half, again, has been raking in the dough. A lot of them saw declining book value in their profits in terms of how much their land was worth, as you saw global depression in property values. At least in 2008 and 9 you saw that. But they are still, and have been the whole time, raking in the money on rents. And companies throughout the United States, throughout the UK and Canada have continued to do that, which is why you've seen an explosion in REITs. Does anyone know what a REIT is?
Real estate investment trusts.
Yeah, these are investment vehicles that have been pouring into Canada that are investing in housing. And you are seeing dozens of them pop up, hundreds of them in small little amounts. And if any of you have investment portfolios through your RSPs, sadly you're probably invested in a few of them. As it's showing you, Toronto has become a ground for global capitalistic trends. Can I pull this up for a second?
Sure.
Do this in a second. One of the reasons why this is that our rental sector is very unique. So other places in other countries and other cities have a pretty big rental sector. Vancouver's been pretty big. Montreal's pretty big as well. Not 50%, but it's still like 40, 30, something like that. But Toronto poses a very unique system. Does anyone know what's unique about Toronto in terms of our rental sector? Anyone? I'll take a little stab here.
Give us a hint.
It's tall. It's the towers. Okay. The towers are very key to Toronto's rental sector. There's a documentary put out the NFB called The 1,000th Tower. It is talking about the 1,000 rental towers in the city of Toronto. Beyond that, we're adding another, as they mentioned, 1,300 condominium towers in the GTA. all right? And almost no other city has that degree of high-rise. New York,
New York is,
New York blows us out of the water in terms of the amount of towers, but for the size of New York, that makes it more sense. For the size of Toronto, the only thing globally that comes close is Moscow. For those Russian fans, there you go. All right. Now, this actually, you have to understand this in the context of what's happening right now, okay? When you're developing and building a rental tower, who are you building it for as a developer? A rental tower. Who are you going to sell that tower to?
speculators.
Not a rental tower, no.
No?
No, because a speculator, you're getting a tower with 300 units in it. All right. How many owners are going to own this tower?
A rental tower?
Yeah.
300.
The development company.
Not the development company. They're the ones that develop it, they build it, they sell it to Transglobe, or Capri, or Briar Lane, or Achilles. These are all companies. Medallion Corporation. These are all major landlords in the city of Toronto. Metcalf. All right. So if you're a developer building this rental tower, and you got to sell it to this one person who's going to make a killing off of the 300 little people in there that we're paying a monthly rent. And what do you want out of that tower? You want something that's going to last as long as possible. What's the difference with a condo? You got 300 units. How many owners do you have?
300. Well, maybe you'll have to 75 if somebody buys a couple. Yeah.
Let's say 300.
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
And what's the issue there? When you're a developer, who are you selling to? You're not selling to one person that's going to do their homework on the foundation, all right, on the containment walls, on how long the roof's going to last, on whether the balconies are properly maintained, on whether the elevators are going to last 25 years. You're selling to 300 people that all want a slice of the little action. And many of these, as noted, are developers. What do you think is happening to these towers? These are being thrown up with glue and honeycomb and sold off. And you're seeing the major damages. And just to let you know, like I remember when I started reading about this and thinking about this, I was talking to construction workers, I was seeing the exploding glass, and I'm like, nobody knows about this. I had a meeting with the Premier's office 2 years ago, because Dalton McGuinty was out and I was coming in, and it was the only time they were willing to meet with me when it didn't matter. And I'm like, there's probably going to be a problem. And she's like, oh yeah, with the condos. Yeah, those things are all going to be slums in 30 years. They know. They know. Now, I mentioned that Toronto is a hot pool of money. And why do I say that? Why is it on the front of global capitalism? I read the Financial Times pretty religiously, not because of its great editorials, but mostly because of its great analysis of what's actually happening both in the capitalist market and in the rental market. And this idea that hot money is floating around and is trying to find a home. For those of you that have never listened to the radio show This American Life, I recommend that you do, where you'll listen to an episode called The Giant Pool of Money. The giant pool of money is a concept that is essentially capitalists, many of whom are in the United States, in China, in Saudi Arabia, are always trying to find a place to sink money to get a good return. Where were they doing it in 2007?
America.
They were sinking money, yes, in the American real estate market and in financial derivatives. All right, mostly in CDOs, which stands for collateralized debt obligations, which were basically a cluster of pieces of mortgages put together. The mortgages were totally unsound. There was a total scam job, massive fraud. Of course, nobody went to jail for it because they're not stealing a loaf of bread. Come on. So what happened in 2008? The whole system collapsed, and all that money, the chunk of it that didn't lose value, had nowhere to go. All right, this happened in the 90s, and the money eventually found a home in tech and web companies. But when that bubble burst, it found a home in the US real estate market and in dodgy financial products. And now that that bubble has gone, they're looking for it for anywhere. So one of the things that you're seeing in a variety of different exchange-traded fund issues, I won't get into it, but you're seeing property markets in certain areas go through the roof. So essentially what happened in the US property market with single-family homes being sold en masse, You're seeing massive condoization in Canada. You're seeing a run on the housing markets in South Africa. You're seeing massive buildup in Poland. Money, hot money, is trying to make a quick buck the same way they always do. Because hell, they almost crashed the world economy and got away with it. Why wouldn't they keep doing the same? So what has happened? Essentially, you've had, as I've said, these pieces of crap being thrown up. They are investment vehicles for a number of investors. Nobody knows the degree of foreign investment. Now, I've talked to a number of people trying to determine this, because again, I'm trying to think as the executive director of my organization 30 years into the future in terms of what's going to happen to the rental market. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. But I'm trying to be like, so who's investing? Who is driving this? Because it's not being met by simple demand in the city of Toronto. Demand is high, but that hasn't seen the 30% over cost. That's not what's driving this. What's mainly driving this is investors. They're not 100% sure who. Sean Hildebrand, that now works for an organization called Urbanation, he used to work for CMHC, says it is very clear domestic dollars are pouring into this. But as they mentioned, the program could be people that are just buying a numbered company here. It could be, yes, cap REIT or small real estate investment trusts. I'm going to sink my money in you, and I want you to buy up all the real estate even though you're a Canadian company. It's unclear, but again, it is crystal clear that big money is doing this. That's why you're seeing an explosion in rates. That's why you're seeing an explosion in prices. A lot of this money is hedge fund money. And something's about to happen. You saw a wonderful, heartwarming, great analysis by CBC of that great work that Flaherty did in 2012 to rein in the mortgage markets. Thank you, Flaherty, for introducing rules like a 40-year or a cap on the 40-year mortgage gone, 30 years mortgage, new down payment rules. And of course, what they failed to mention was that these rules were the rules that were actually done before 2006 by the Liberal government and changed in 2006 by Jim Flaherty until he totally annihilated the market and then changed it back. All right, the problem that we're seeing right now, according to some people, the influx of money, the reason why Canada is one of these hubs of massive global real estate development is precisely because the Conservative government made it that way. When did they make it that way? In 2006. You have heard probably that Canada did not have the same subprime mortgage problem that the United States did. Okay? This is horseshit. It didn't because all of the data that they're looking at is from 2006 and before. They have no data on 2006 and after, or if they have the data, you know how the current government loves data. They are not showing it. They changed the rules. It is very crystal clear. If you talk to a guy named Alan Walks in the city center, you see a massive explosion in Canadian debt. All right, it is one of the major criticisms that Mark Carney, the rock star governor of the Bank of Canada, it is one of the major criticisms that when he moved to the UK that people said, yes, great, everything was fine for some reason in Canada, but private debt has exploded. And what does private debt and housing prices look like? Okay, in the United States, you had this slow build up until 2008 when you had this massive crash. And now it's going like that again. These are housing prices. What happened in Canada, all right? You had the massive build up. You had this dip. But then things shot up again. And you've seen that actually in the housing and rental markets here. All right, if any of you that have rented and try to look for a place right now, it is a nightmare. And it's precisely because of this. And this has coincided with debt levels, personal debt levels of Canadians. Alan Walks at the UST City Center tried to analyze it. Where's most of this debt coming from? Is it explosion? Credit card debt, home equity lines, housing. It's mostly mortgage and home equity line debt. It is debt built on the backs of escalating housing prices. And in 2012, they just changed the rules. They changed the rules back. What do you think that's going to do to this? party is over, the honeymoon is over. When those rules were changed back, there was a great belief that a lot of the investor money started to flow out of Toronto. Why haven't you seen a decrease in the housing prices? Well, I don't want to get too much into Milton Friedman, but he did have a whole thing on long and variable lags in the economy. All right, you are likely going to see the effects of this decision 2 to 3 years from now. Condos are going down, but one of the reasons why the housing prices have not been going down is due to the uptake in single-family homes. Basically, the prices have shot up so high that people like you and me that might want to buy a house at some point can't afford them. But now that prices are leveling off and condos are dropping, single-family homes is where people are trying to get into in life. So that is stable. Basically, there is a domestic demand element to this, but the thing that's been driving the stock, that's been driving the amount of money, that's been driving the crazy growth, has been foreign capitalist dollars. I want to talk about 2 more things, and then I'm going to wrap up my rant. First of all, there isn't really a clear consensus of what this is going to mean for Toronto in the future. All right, there is a belief, and really a massive debate right now happening amongst the major banks, major debate right now happening amongst the editorial boards and the major papers, about whether Canada is headed for a massive crash, correction, whatever you want to call it. Not only because the housing market has gone down, and people could take a bath very similar to how they took a bath in the United States, but because a lot of our growth, a lot of the jobs, a lot of the great economy that Canada's had has actually been on the back of this growth. Mm-hmm. If you look at something called finance, insurance, and real estate, most of the growth of the Canadian economy in the last 10 years has been in those sectors. And the moment you take the wind out of that sails, and then all of a sudden people can't access those home equity lines, and all of a sudden people can't access reselling their home for more value, the whole house of cards comes down. But some people are saying, look, domestic demand might keep it up. You might just have a small deflation. 2 other key things that are going to be a problem. What do you think is going to happen to those towers when they start falling apart? You've had almost no rental housing built in the city of Toronto in the last 10 years. 70% of the development has been condominiums, 23% has been houses, 7% has been rental housing. All those towers, when they're crumbling, when they have holes and leaks, are going to become slum housing. So they mentioned St. Jamestown. I've been to St. Jamestown. St. Jamestown, huh?
It's actually improving these days.
St. Jamestown was built to last. All right, the conditions have been allowed to go because of shoddy landlords, a poor income bracket, and the fact that a lot of those folks in those buildings are just marginalized folks. A lot of them are newcomers, they don't want to complain, they don't know how to use the systems, people don't listen to them or take them seriously because they're people of color, or new immigrants with families, things like that. But the actual buildings themselves, the solid foundations are decent. All right? These condos are not built that way. You are looking at, you're going to have a gorgeous view in your $700 a month apartment that is falling to pieces because when somebody tried to sell it, they couldn't, so they offloaded it off to a real estate investment trust company from the United States. Also, thanks to our good friend Mike Harris, I know you're all a big fan.
Yeah, right.
Big fan.
I'm going to get into a bit of history to why this is, but I won't get into it. Actually, I'll just cut it off and.
We are going to have a Q&A.
Yeah. What time is it now?
We're now at
8:38.
Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up. I have to leave at 9, so you will have a good Q&A, but I'll be here for a few questions. Basically, no building built after 1991 has any rent control. Not a single one. All those condos are going to be without rent control. Slums without rent control. I talked in the beginning about precarity of housing, so that's what we're looking at. So I'm going to end with this. I know this is all doom and gloom. I know you can feel the shake and the quiver in your bones, and if you own a condo, I'm sorry. But I will tell you that for those that believe in socialism and that for those that believe in an actual progression towards revolution or better living conditions for all, these kind of systems do actually create great opportunities for that. When you have workers in one workspace, a large factory, under precarious working conditions, you pose very good opportunities for labor organization. And when you have 250 people living in a high-rise building under one landlord, and instead of getting paid, they're paying the money, you also have a good opportunity for tenant associations. My organizations exist because of that, because things have gotten better because of that, because tenant associations being developed have been strong, and our organization is working on doing that too. And I think you're going to see that. You see a lot of cohesion in the barrios in Venezuela. You see them in high-rise buildings in New York sometimes, because people can work together on this. So although it's difficult, I think you are going to see where there's a will, a way, and a consciousness, you will see good development. And high-rise buildings will be very similar to workspaces in terms of the action and organizing that happens in the future. I will leave you with that positive note and open it to the Q&A.
Okay. Well, that was terrific, and there's more to be said. So we're going to open it up now to questions and comments. I'll try to maintain a gender-balanced list. I'm just going to throw out a question, but don't answer it now, but in the course of it. I heard that there's going to be some legislative action to curb profits from speculation. That the Ontario government is talking about bringing. Is that a fake, or is there anything to that? But anyway, Valerie, I'm just going to go across the room this way. Why don't you lead off, and then we'll get some other people, and Geordie can answer maybe after 5 or 6 of them. Sure. Okay?
Yes, okay, my mind is swimming. I've got a million questions. I'm going to try and curtail it. Geordie, what do you feel, what is your thinking on co-ops and the direction? Do you think co-op buildings, rentals might become, as a possible solution, more prevalent, more maybe the way to go in the near or distant future? That's one question. What do you think?
Well, I'm gonna give him a chance to answer after 5 or 6.
Okay.
Because if we go back and forth,
Sure.
we won't have enough
I got
audience
a few
participation.
questions. You take shorthand?
I'm taking notes.
Is that okay for now?
No.
You got one more?
Well, maybe 2 or 3 or 4.
Okay, quickly.
Okay, look, I'm originally from England, okay? I'm Valerie, I'm a member of Socialist Action, by the way. DMT,
Yes.
I came here in '59. Okay, it's like my age, that's okay, I just had it. I'm 68, okay? I've seen this city grow. I've seen everything. When I first came here, the tallest building was the Royal York Hotel, you know. And now look at what we have, right? I remember back in the day when I was working, when I was in my teens, 20s and up, you know, I worked at a job. I could pay rent with 1 week's salary. Who can do that these days? Nobody, right? And you have to have, okay, honey, you're lucky. Angelina, you're lucky. Yeah, so now we have people who have families, both partners, spouses, have to work, and most of the money is going to rent, mortgages, food, cost of living, and education. We all know this, right? And what do they have left? You know, even young working couples working downtown, when they're paying the condo fees and what do they have left? Very little, very little. So I'm thinking, and there's no apartment being built, rental units being built. We're going to become saturated with condos. We're almost at that point now. Every little square postage stamp, you know, there's only so much space left that you can get you can't get any more condos in. And then they're going to start crumbling. The city's not building enough affordable rentals anymore. So then, and a lot of people can't afford condos, they can't afford to buy houses, they can't afford the rents.
Valerie, I gotta
Where are
run.
people supposed to live?
Okay, other questions? Briefer? Yes? And then
I'm
here.
sorry about that.
It's okay.
I have a question, maybe you can answer about lofts, refurbished buildings. What do you think about those, if they're gonna have the same fate as, the new condo glass towers? And also, I was thinking about, this is just a suggestion for your rental
Please.
people. If for example, you mentioned the building at Young and Shepherd or something that was without heat for a month. Why don't the renters get together, mobilize and say, we're not paying rent? Change the locks on the doors.
Rent
We're
strike.
not allowed to do that.
Sort of like squatting, you know what I mean? I know you're not allowed to do that, but they're not allowed to
Let's
buy
try.
you heat.
I
Extreme
can answer.
conditions
Okay, we'll
require
get to that.
extreme measures.
Thank you very much. Right here?
Yes, I just wanted to mention that last month there was an interesting article in The Guardian in Britain called Billionaires Row, where they're talking about the north of London and these wonderful old mansions that had been bought by overseas investors. And they've basically been allowed to fall into ruin. And this raises an interesting question in Toronto. If we've got such overseas investors in a big way, will they simply allow these wonderful condos to fall into ruin? Because they're still investments.
Yes.
Terrific presentation. As a graduate student of political economy, I say, I wish we had more courses, lectures like this at York University. I'm really amazed by the level of sophistication and the practical advices or recommendations that you made. I have millions of questions, but today I will just make one comment. It's a rather long comment, but stop me if I talk too much, Barry.
You got 2 minutes.
You do anyway. So
Okay, 2 minutes. All right. This presentation reminded me a sentence, a lecture given by famous radical geographer David Harvey. David Harvey once said, "This capitalism is very irrational. It's like having pasta, a pot, boiled water, and everything needed to cook pasta, but you can't cook pasta and everybody dies of hunger." It's so similar in this story. I mean, you have all the capacity, as humanity. We have the capacity to build large buildings. We have capacity to build cities, yet we still have the problem of homelessness. We still have the problems of hunger. We still have the problems of unemployment. How stupid is that? And this is the irrationality of capitalism, and it's the rationality of an irrational system in the words of David Harvey. We can't do much with such a corrupt system. Well, I mean, if I have 1 minute, I will just...
30 seconds.
In the 30 seconds, I will just reflect on the international dimension of the housing crisis that is taking place in the emerging markets. In the aftermath of the 2008 crisis, in order to recover from the crisis, the American Central Bank, Fed, literally published dollars. And this dollars found its way in the emerging markets like India, Turkey, so on and so forth. This money had to find some places to invest because it was just like cash that was recently created. And they found the land markets and the real estate markets in such countries like Turkey, India, profits to make. Okay, I'm just wrapping. And in order to sell condos, sell houses, they just privatized the public lands, like the Gezi Park in Istanbul, which created a mass action, which created a mass revolt. And I think we will be seeing more of such stuff, because regardless of the public social benefits, I mean, these people just want profits. They don't want to satisfy the needs of the people. And they will continue doing such stuff. And there will be necessarily revolts by the people in Istanbul and eventually in Toronto too.
Thank you. Okay, for gender balance, I'm going to go to the sister here, and then Sunny, who's been patiently waiting, and then here. Yes.
It's kind of short and sweet.
Is the phone number on the board?
No, not
Your office, your office,
okay.
Your office and email.
No, not that. I get calls at 4 a.m. being like, my landlord just told me blah, 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 and I'm like...
Office number. Office. Okay. Sunny, and then over here, and then over here.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question from the other perspective. There are a lot of people that do own property, and I guess Diane Francis from the National Post was trying to imply that they're all like from Asia, although there's a lot of people with Asian last names that live in Canada or born in Canada that bought into these properties. But I think realistically, a lot of the foreign money does probably come from Asia. And Dubai or Saudi Arabia. Like I think a lot of people in Hong Kong bought into Canada or British Columbia after the recession in '92, which kept their economy going. And today, Toronto and Vancouver probably make up 40% of the real estate market. So I don't think the pullback would be that large, given that Toronto's a desirable place to live, and then people will have to find some way of living. Like I've actually lived in one of those condos downtown just because it was close to the entertainment district and the financial district, and but that building was in City Place, and it did have some problems with like the heating and cooling, or certain light fixtures had to be shipped in from Europe. I think specifically it was Lantera Developments that had the problems with the glass panes falling on the street, so that might be that builder's supplier, I guess. So if a lot of people own property and plan to retire on that, because that's the one thing that's constantly going up, how do you argue against these scenarios where, you know, like that wall of condos is going to become like a slum, when that might not be the case, because Regent Park is being redeveloped now, so it's basically based on people's income rather than the housing stock.
Thanks, Sonny. I'll just take a couple more because Geordie's got to go, so this is a chance to actually present him while he's here with your question. Yes.
You mentioned that the housing and the condo market prices are beginning to dip.
Not dip, they're just leveling off.
Leveling
really.
off, okay. So my question was, I thought you said dip more, but let's say even leveling off.
A lot of people think they are going to head for a dip. If I had to be a betting man, I would guess that.
Well, my question was, what do you personally, do you think it would at all, I guess be at the level or the seriousness of the U.S.? Not could it be?
I can answer that.
You can answer that? Yeah, I just want to know what you think about that.
Here.
Thanks.
Yeah, my question is just about your thoughts regarding the condo market and the banking sector, because I think the banks are as much culprits as the condo, because why would the mortgages be approved for condos that probably in the next 30 years will be going down and becoming slums, and that's the period by which most of the condo owners would have paid off their mortgages. And then question number two, would you say this phenomenon is also in cities like Mississauga, Aurora, and such other growing suburbans?
Okay, last quick comment, John, and then we'll go to Geordie.
Okay, I just wanted to make a comment about the Ontario Municipal Board. I think it's a very good example of the sort of systemic corruption that we have in the system. I mean, not only are all the laws made basically to favor the developers and the landlords, but the OMB, like most government boards, is another patronage thing. I mean, the people are, it's political favors, and the people who are involved have no necessary qualifications except, if they're real estate shells, which a lot of them are. So maybe Geordie could make some additional comments on the OMB, which I think simply we should campaign to abolish it.
Yeah.
I agree.
Right on, I agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a lot there, sorry, but
I'm going to try to pack this into
do
10
what you can in
minutes.
the time you have.
And I know you're going to want to argue or discuss or debate, but you're going to do that amongst yourselves. I have to run and catch a bus to Peterborough.
Uh-oh.
I know. So I want to start with Sunny's comment, just because I just want to be clear here. A lot of people do an hour's worth of research on the internet and think they're an expert in something, and I don't really want to pretend that I am. I see almost every development application in the city of Toronto. It comes across my desk, and I follow these trends a lot in the media, but no one is 100% clear what's going to happen here. All right, you are absolutely right that some of those condos could end up being livable neighborhoods, and I think your comment on Regent Park was actually very good, because Regent Park was actually developed well. It was city land, it was TCHC land, where they sold off a piece of it to build a condo, to fix up the units. And the reason why there's problems with development, but that's at least planned. There's at least a desire to bring in mixed development there. The problem that I see with condominiums happening down on the waterfront and happening throughout most of the suburbs, is it is Wild West. As you've noted, it is provincial mandated. The OMB is kind of the organization set up to kind of deal with all the stuff. The laws are totally in the favor that if you want to build it, you can. And I have discussion after discussion with city councilors that their only tool is try to get something designated heritage. And if they can do that, they might be able to save it. But other than that, the condo's going on. The only debate that happens is around the density. All right? So right now, you saw that in BC. They were saying the government was there to help shape things. That is not happening here. Here it is literally development happening in a Frankenstein sprawl. And God help us in terms of how it turns out. I want to talk about
Water condos might not be the case you expect.
okay, the U.S. crash. All right. Do I think that we're going to have a similar scenario here? No, because I do not believe that the mortgages that have been dealt with have created the backbone of a financial product system. Money is coming in here. You could see a loss of 10% if there is a deflation, but that's not going to break the buck of international money markets. You're not going to have this wiping out and total freeze. You could have a major problem in terms of domestic consumption, because a lot of the places where Canadians are getting their money to buy things and pay for things is lines of credit. And again, the construction industry is a big job creator that does actually the development that you're seeing in the city of Toronto, that is picking up a lot of the slack. Remember, all that development was happening when unemployment was at 10%. If you take away that development, it's a lot higher, it's a lot worse. So I think you could see some negative elements of that. The banking sector, I think that they are responsible for this only in the sense that they had a bagman by the name of Jim Flaherty in federal government who changed the rules to basically make it Wild West for them too, all right? He then pulled them back and said, you cannot put out those mortgages. But I mean, you have to understand that a flea of mortgages for Canada is okay because every mortgage is insured by Canadian Housing Corporation. CMHC insures every mortgage. As my good friend Greg Albo, who I'm sure some of you know, has said, that means they privatize all the profits and socialize all the losses. My notes here. Do I think this is going to happen in Mississauga? I think Mississauga is in a worse shape than Toronto is because their entire method of growth has been basically Ponzi scheme growth. They have been paying for things with development charges, so as long as they keep developing, they pay their bills. That's why about 2 years ago you saw a 10% property tax increase in Mississauga, because the chickens are coming home to roost, and when they really come home to roost, unless she lives to be 1,000 years, Hazel over there in Mississauga is basically going to retire and walk off into the sunset being like, what are you going to do about it? Suburbs. I think you're seeing that in a lot of suburbs as well. Okay, I want to end off with two things. Lofts and rent strikes and co-ops. Okay? So lofts, I don't think you're going to see the same problem at all. I think you're going to see more of a Montreal system. If any of you have been there and stayed in a mansion-sized place for $250 a month, you'll know what I mean. A lot of the loft spaces were actually built to last as well as warehouses. They get converted, so the structural elements of them are actually decent. But I think spaces like that, you're actually just going to see massive inflation unless you start going really far out. But again, as our industrial manufacturing capacity wanes and you have large warehouses sitting around empty, a lot of those get converted into cheap housing unless they just tear them down and build condos. Right. But if they stay with lofts, I think it'll be okay. Why don't renters get together and do a rent strike? They do sometimes. The Roma community in Etobicoke, a bunch of them just did that. But the reason why the vast majority of people don't do that is the same reason why the vast majority of workers don't get together and form a damn union. All right? It's difficult. It's hard. There are people and risks and consequences for you to do that. But again, I think when people get organized in a wave of activity and freight train of unstoppable change comes through, you are going to start to see that. You are going to start to see people essentially in hard negotiations with their landlord, where unless you're going to evict 350 people that aren't going to go, they're going to go kicking and screaming, you're going to have to send in the SWAT team, you're not really going to see that as often as you'd like to.
So when push comes to shove, we're going to see some rebellion.
Well, I mean, people always say that. Oh, when things get really bad, the change is going to come. I personally, in my job, don't accept that, which is why we went and got some money to do tenant organizing now. Because I think that the roots of that have to happen now. Everyone wants to be an ally and an activist until there's ally and activist shit to do. All right? It's hard work, it's difficult. I'd rather go home and watch House of Cards and Orange is the New Black. But at the end of the day, I think if we really want to see the change, we've got to actually do the work. And it's hard to do it, it's hard to stay together. But I think a lot of you are here right now because you believe that too. And I urge you all to start a tenant association in your building. Co-ops, a bit of a tall ball of wax. I think you've seen some of the best social housing, most stable social housing in Toronto from cooperative housing, the heyday of which was in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. Of course, our good friends at the Conservative governments have pulled all the funding agreements for them. Subsidies are turning away, so you're going to see a massive jacking up of rents and a really difficult thing for a lot of people if they aren't replaced. Additionally, one final note is that co-ops, you often see the same problems that you have in condominiums, but the costs are usually lower because at this stage a lot of them are paid off.
Sorry, I know you have to go, we're out of time, but I have one more question. It's about lane housing or houses. Like, do you know anything about that?
You mean like coach houses?
I have to go right now. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
So we're going to continue the dialogue here, and maybe we'll find some answers to questions amongst us, amongst ourselves. And after we're done here, we're going to go for a drink at the nearby pub. So, who would like to answer a question, or ask a question, or make a comment? Now's an opportunity. Julius?
Well, I was born in Toronto, and I've lived here on and off since. But I've moved back to the city about 5-6 years ago, and I basically graduated school, I got a job, I worked for the government, and I thought, well, you're going to progress with life, you got to buy a house, right? Well, that whole idea is non-existent for me. I mean, even if I were, and before Flaherty's changes, I probably would be eligible for a $500,000 loan at the bank with my wage, which really, I can't afford that. I mean, it's such a risky thing. And this, these situations of being able to get access to credit like that is just, I mean, it creates the situations like we saw in the United States. I think a lot of people, they got into buying these condos because they said, oh, I'll buy the condo, I'll hold on to it for 5 or 6 years, and then I'll flip it and I'll sell it. And that might work for a lot of people. I think a lot of people made money with that. Especially if they bought at the right time. But, I mean, for me, this is a classic example of a form of overproduction. I rent, and that's probably what I'll end up doing. But certainly, I think that this is going to create issues in the future, as Geordie did such a fantastic job, and I'd like to have a discussion with him. He should join SA.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we'll have to talk to him later. Maybe we can get him to come to an educational.
Very familiar.
Yeah, it was great. Another thing is that, another area which he may or may not be familiar with is rural land speculation. In southwestern Ontario, which has been a depressed economic area for decades, the rural area there, over the last 3 years, the land value has doubled. In southwestern Ontario, London down to Windsor, that area. And a lot of Europeans are buying that land up. So there's a lot of speculation when it comes to agricultural land as well, which is interesting. So I'll just leave it at that.
Thanks, Julius. Valerie?
There was really one question that I really wanted to ask Geordie. I'm going to get in touch with him. So we all pretty much know the scenario, what's going to happen, but unfortunately for people You know, it's going to take a long time, many years. In the interim, in the meantime, what are people supposed to do that can't afford a mortgage, can't afford to buy a house or a condo, or maybe don't want one? You know, there's a lot of people retired that have sold their homes. They don't want the upkeep, they're getting older, they move into rental units or apartments. I recently have a friend of mine, she's in her 70s, born in Italy, raised in Scotland, God bless her, and a retired professional, and with all this recent hydro business, she had a rat burst, her place was flooded, and she said, it's one of the reasons I gave up and sold my house, so I wouldn't have to deal with this shit, you know, that's why she moved into an apartment. And this building was built in the 60s. I know the building, it's at Young and York Mills, and it's very well kept, but it's aging. So when the rental units are aging, when the condo units start aging, and in the interim, you know, prices are going up, cost of living, inflation, etc., people can't afford to have the North American dream home, you know. So what are they supposed to do? So that's why I live in a co-op, and I see changes that are happening there. And like Geordie just said about co-ops, we can see in the foreseeable future that you know, it's going to be more costly to live in a co-op. I'm at the point where I'm ready to pitch a tent or a yurt on the beach in Hawaii or something. And no mortgage, you know. You take a bath in the ocean, that's it, right by the beach, you know. Or maybe we have to come up, just a wee yoke there, folks. No, I'm serious about it. It's getting to this point. Where do we go? What do we do? Maybe, whatever happened to the great architect, Buckminster Fuller of the 60s and the 70s, the geodesic dome. You know, like maybe people now, okay, I'm retired, I've got a few bucks saved, you know, you can only have so much in a registered retired savings plan, and then after that, what do you do with it? I'm a socialist. I'm not going to invest in corporations and mutual funds, so what do I do with that extra few bucks? You know, maybe we can come up with a solution whereby maybe if we rent or something like habitat, you know, why aren't we building more habitat? Why can't we all get together and build some homes for each other, and if we could all help build them and then own them, and they wouldn't cost so much? I think there's solutions that we have to look at.
Yeah. Well, I want to say apropos of that,
What's that?
unless I see other hands coming up, I think apropos of that, we can do that, but it's a matter of marshalling the wealth.
Do something.
There's enormous wealth in society, but it's mostly in private hands, and the people who are the great acquisitors don't even pay taxes on that wealth, which means it's unavailable for social purposes. So I wanted to say, I mean, I don't really have anything to add or to differentiate very much with what Geordie had to say, but I want to say for the record, in terms of the position of the sponsoring organization of this evening's event, there's plenty of money for building homes, quality, above standard, decent housing. There's plenty of money. The problem is that the wrong kind of housing is being built. Unaffordable, not to mention faulty and substandard. At the same time, people are living in overcrowded and dangerous housing, and the fire and the tragedy that took place with 2 deaths and 9 other injuries in Kensington Market last night is just, you know, the tip of the iceberg. There have been so many other examples of that, going back to that, what was the name of the hotel?
Rupert.
The Rupert Hotel, that's right, just 10 years ago. And there have been, you know, a series of these kinds of incidents on a regular basis since then. The essence of the problem, in our view, is that we have production for profit, not production for people.
That's right.
Production for profit, not production for people. What do we need? We need to turn that around. What we need is production for people, not production for private profit. And if you marshal the enormous wealth of society, this society, which has drawn so much of its wealth from other societies around the globe, and from the free labor of 300 years of slavery, and from the exploitation of its own domestic workforce on an ongoing basis, then you have the means to do wondrous things, to eradicate illiteracy, to terminate most of the diseases that plague the human race, to educate everyone and enable people to fully develop their potential. So what does it mean in order that we would be able to have production for people, not for private profit? Well, it will require more than just regulation, more than just a minor adjustment to the tax laws to discourage speculation, because those adjustments can be countermanded by another government coming just a few months or a few years at the problem down the road. What it means, what it entails, in our view, is public ownership. Public ownership, not just of those industries, but we're talking about public ownership of land development, public ownership of the construction industry. You know, the government at all three levels hasn't built much housing in the last 10 years or longer in this country. So when there's a head of steam for solving the housing problem and talk, even at the higher levels of government, about building some housing, well, who are they going to get to build it? Private developers who are going to do it for a profit. So public money goes to private producers to line their pockets, and if they can get away with shoddy construction in order to elevate the profits that they realize in the process, then so be it as far as they're concerned. It means, yes, building co-ops, not condos. It means building good social housing, detached, semi-detached, townhouses, as well as towers. There's a place for all of these. But the essential element is in the involvement of people in the planning process, not owners, not the tiny minority who hold the society captive, who pay the politicians, who write the laws, and appoint the officials to bodies like the Ontario Municipal Board that favor this tiny minority. It means workers, tenants, and community members controlling the housing in which we live and the housing that is yet to be built. It means more democratic decision-making. It means directly involving residents in these community councils, which the existing ones in Toronto post-amalgamation are just a showcase for the politicians who dominate them, who bring their faction supporters. They're not really places where a lot of people can freely participate with the confidence that their views will be heard and that their interests will be advanced. So we need to involve people in councils and ward associations where they have a real sense of democratic participation and effective decision-making. And the only way you can have effective decision-making with involving the majority of people who don't have a lot of money is to really disenfranchise those people who have a lot of money, who have been calling the shots, who've been funding the politicians, who've been writing the laws or getting those politicians to write the laws for them, and who are dominating bodies like the OMB through patronage appointments. So you have to disenfranchise wealth. You have to expropriate the expropriators. This is a phrase that goes back a century and a half to Karl Marx and Frederick Engels in the Communist Manifesto when they talked about the need to economically democratize society. Expropriate the expropriators. It's not taking away someone's, jacket, shirt, toothbrush, shoes, car. It's about the trillionaires who dominate the society and who are in fact ruining the environment with little care or concern for the future. What would such a system be? Well, we call it socialism. But whatever you call it, it means, a commonwealth, common ownership of the means of production, distribution, and exchange. It means a profoundly more democratic society than the one that capitalism provides, where the 0.1% rule, I don't go with this 1% business, it's really a tiny fraction of that 1% who really make the effective decisions that cause the outcomes with which we are dealing. A system based on rational planning in harmony with nature and not obedient to the private bottom line. That's what we stand for, and if you agree with that perspective, we warmly invite you to join the socialist movement. And this one's a pretty good example of the socialist movement. Socialist Action welcomes your interest and participation. If there are any more comments or questions, we'll take them now, and then we will adjourn to the Regal Beagle on the south side of Bloor, just a block west of here, for refreshments and informal conversation. Al.
On Wednesday night, Judy and Ian and myself were next door for the NDP's public hearings on Harper's electoral reform laws. So basically Harper's...
The Fair Election Act.
Election, right.
The Unfair Election Act.
That's you know, that's the one. And basically, you can see why SA has said so many times that workers cannot just rely on electoral politics, because otherwise you can get someone like in power just changes the election rules. And if you just rely on electoral politics, then you know you're screwed.
Thanks, Al. Judy?
Well, nobody's talked about homelessness. I mean, more and more people are don't have a place to live in the city of Toronto, and it's very little places for them. If they have any places, they have live in hellholes in the West End, the West End, or even around Queen Street or along Queen Street, and more and more of them are being forced to move out of the city of Toronto to where? To just places that even have less housing for them. So that's something it's constant increase in homelessness in Toronto and other cities in the Greater Toronto area.
That's a very important issue, which is why we'll be demonstrating tomorrow on the issue of the disability rates and the welfare rates, which is driving more people to desperation. Yes, brother?
Well, I just want to mention, all have talked about the government involvement, creating regulation, controlling it. These are all mirage. These are all orchestrated. You have to understand, this is a system which is run by the government and in collusion of the capitalist people. And they will always fulfill the need of the capitalist class, and that the masses of people are feeding into it to create the surplus value. And that surplus value is again the minimum maintenance of the worker that is maintained. His whole through his life is drained out through the mortgage system. Mm-hmm. Nobody has the capacity to buy a house, but this scheme has been created by the capitalist system. And then you sell the house, you think I have made money? No. You have lost 3 times my mortgage. That's what is the point. People should understand this. You cannot address this issue by making regulation. It needed the whole economic systems to be changed. That's what you're looking at. People should look at it. The example is, I can tell you this example, in 1929, the housing price rent in Soviet Union was $29 and $31. I visited Russia in 1989 or something. It remained exactly the same. No change. That was the rent. And towards the end, when it was dismantled, by law, constitution, every person was entitled to a house accommodation, housemate accommodation. So you change the system of production of masses, you can alter the whole system. That's the aim people should be looking at.
Thanks, brother. It's true, it's a question of priorities. And in Cuba, housing is virtually free. It's very low cost, no cost. Transportation is too. It's not high quality, and the embargo has made it worse and continues to be a noose around the neck of that country, that nation. But you know, Cuba exports more doctors than any other country to help people around the world. It's a question of priorities. And imagine a society as rich as ours, if we got the priorities correct, what kind of land, what kind of society this would be. It would be the envy of the world. In fact, it could be the model, and the world could be more and more like the vision that we have. It's just a matter of getting control, realizing that, as was just said, labor and nature are the source of all wealth. The question is, the wealth that's created, what is to be done with it? Who is to decide what is to be done with it? Shall it be decided by a tiny minority of vultures, the 0.1% or less, or will there be an economic democracy? Well, that is in essence what we are striving to create, an economic democracy. Call it what you will. Economic democracy under the direct control of workers and consumers. That's the vision that we have, and it's really the only one that can save this world from environmental catastrophe. Because if we're going to shift from carbon-intensive, fossil fuel burning energy systems to green energy systems, that's going to cost money, but that cost can be afforded if you expropriate the wealth of the trillionaire corporations that benefit from burning fossil fuels. You can make that conversion, and you can get all the other priorities right too. But it requires a political organization which is committed to doing that. What can we do in the short run? Well, there's a race for mayor, and that's very far from the vision that I just outlined. But you know, Olivia Chow is running. She's probably the only candidate on the so-called progressive side of the spectrum. We don't want another David Miller administration. Those interested in defeating Ford and the other right-wing business candidates should think about how we can force Olivia to take a position in favor of massive expansion of the public transportation system, not just hiring more bus drivers, as she said yesterday. Yeah. Massive expansion of the public transportation system and the social housing system in this city, and pay for it by taxing big wealth, you know, including, you know, the holdings near and far of the 0.1%, and even religious institutions, which, by the way, pay no taxes municipally whatsoever. Temples, synagogues, churches, mosques, they pay no taxes whatsoever. Did you know that? That would be a significant contribution, but there are other more important sources. Pressure her to advance that perspective in the coming election. And if she doesn't, then we need to work on making sure that we can mount such an alternative ourselves in the not-too-distant future. So, thank you all for coming this evening. Buy lots of literature. Join us at the march at King and John tomorrow at 12:30, 1 o'clock, and come to the next Rebel Film. All the best. Thank you. Join us for a drink if you're not too busy. What's your name?
I don't know, we'll have to have an intervention.
I heard that.